So thank you to all of you loved ones around the world. We are showing up with light behind us, which means we're switching it up. I know that really messes up some of you. Judy, girl, thank you for showing up. We see you. We know 3:30 wake up call is not easy, but thank you to the loved ones that supported her to make sure she was here. This course, we don't know how long it's going to go. So stay as long as you can. If you got to go, that's fine. You know, we always put things up. But all we know is we have 21 pages that we got to get through. So when we say stacked, the fact that we could actually compact the essence of trust. Did you notice how we went trust and then trust? Because it means two completely different things. And so this course came through on Monday and it's been coming through me. I don't know how many times I said to this one, I'm like, oh, Darren, do you know what they're showing me? And you would just smile at me. Mm-hmm. Over and over. I'm like, this is incredible. So you be clear as as I tap into this energy and get confirmation and validation of it through various ways. This is why we say, feel this, loved ones. Notice what you see as this information is coming in.
And again, loved ones, this doesn't faze me the same way it does new people coming in, or even if you've been around this for a year or three, the impact of what we're doing. Again, I've been drowning in the impact for decades. So it doesn't, I shrug it right off like it doesn't even really matter anymore. But to see the enlightenment, the joy, the aha moments, the epiphanies in others reminds me again of why we're doing this and how important it is and why we need to keep going. Again, we are a select group. By this select group, though, I don't mean just this 30 people that are on this particular chat. I'm talking about the 300,000 plus, or 3 million that are around the globe right now, pursuing these things, that are actually doing the research, that are doing the digging, and they're actually having their aha moments when A plus B equals D. You're like, wait a minute, what happened to C? This is all about why we're doing this. This is all about us coming together and expressing and sharing. Again, I don't have all the answers. I might only have 99% of them, but that's not enough. We need 100%. And we
only have 99% of the answers.
We're only going to get there when we work together. So again, this is why we love the feedback. We love, as Kim was suggesting, the wisdom dropped in the chats, the questions asked in the chats. There's no such thing as a silly question. Again, we all are coming from a place where we had literally no wisdom at all. And any wisdom we got, we're coming from lawyers and bankers and politicians. Not where we want to be. Let them have their realm. We're here to do something different.
And the cleaner we get, the more we get. The more we clean our hands and remove clouds, the more information can come in. And that's exactly what's happening to divergence. Is the cleaner we've gotten, the more we're getting. And so we got to get through this. We can't even stay too much on intros.
We're not going to waste time with the la-di-das.
Yeah, here we go. This is the reason this course is coming in. Number one, it all goes back to trust. I want you to feel that one, loved ones. Because there's been messages that have been coming in and old dirty teachings they wanted us to be distracted by, that Spirit is now going to give us the insight on. And hang on, again, this is going to ruffle some of you. It's going to disturb you. It's going to be like, But again, just feel this. This is about starting to trust your source. You can't trust anything until you trust your source. You got to start trusting your source, which is the part of you that knows. And divergence knows the first thing you need to do in all of this ascension progress and process is to make peace with yourself.
Stop fighting. It's that level of frustration that comes with banging your head against a situation where you know there's going to be no resolve because you've tried it a number of times. The result was not what you wanted, so why do we keep doing it? This is where we need to ascend. We need to get a little bit better footing. We need to actually grow spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, all of it. We need to become not who we were.
And we have loved ones that want to get in the garden, but here's the thing. There's no wars allowed in the garden of any kind, including the ones within you. So you need to, if you want to make peace in the world, make peace with you first.
And peace is a huge component here, loved ones. Again, we were deemed to be participating. And again, the word participating is huge. We played a part in a stage play. We played a role in a game. We participated in sin. We didn't even know what we were doing, but which is why we can be easily forgiven. How can you punish a 5-month-old for not knowing how to do something? Like, come on, we're talking about babies. We were literally babies with the spiritual consciousness that we're talking about now. This is why we need to be a little bit more sympathetic towards ourselves. We need to cut ourselves some slack. We were so indoctrinated. We were so programmed. Again, this is where the trusts play such a significant role because prior to what we're talking about today, we had no business creating trusts. We had no understanding of what trusts are. And we didn't understand what the result could be. We were blindfolded and put a bag over our head and thrown in the river. We were just left to die. That's why scripture says that we were thrown to the wolves, as in you are up against such adversity, you have no idea. But for he or she that can overcome and learn and grow and spiritually ascend, man, is there ever some chocolate milk and honey waiting for everybody.
Treats. Absolutely. And so this course came to be because here's the thing. We have a Queen School. And this Queen School, among other platforms that we had to start learning how to trust one another. Because here's the thing, if I'm going to bring in queens, I need to trust them. So I had to teach them how to trust. None of us were taught that. That's the crazy part. So we had to go into training to learn, how do we do that?
So we had to go back to the beginning. Really?
There's no manual on this one. How do I ask my queens to become spiritual sisters, to trust and rely and protect each other?
When everyone's living in fear.
That this is your new spiritual family. Here you go. There's a process in merging that, which was interesting. And so as a result of that, I'm like, Darren, like, let's talk about this. How do we merge this? How do I teach trust? He goes, Jody, you have to make a new agreement. That's all he had to say to me. And I went down holes.
And why? Because the first agreement was filthy. We didn't know how to create the agreement properly, which is why it wasn't binding. Can you imagine making an agreement full of holes and of no foundational purpose? What is it going to serve? How is it going to employ the parties to do certain things? It won't. It is not sufficient by its very nature to carry any weight forward. Again, how are you going to run to the water well with a sieve and bring water back to the village? By the time you get there, where'd all the water go? That was literally our lives. Our lives were sieves. We couldn't contain or hold anything.
Swiss cheese.
Yeah, because we
love that one analogy.
we literally had no capacity to hold anything. And we'll explain that why we were incapacitated.
So we were encouraging our loved ones to create new soul agreements, new trusts with themselves. Because I can guarantee if you're on this meeting right now, you've heard about the little you meditations. Well, you can't go back and teach your little you how to trust unless you trust you. So this is actually where it all starts. And so we had a brave loved one Natalie, one of our queens in training, who's created a new soul agreement with herself. And then we had many loved ones jump on. We've actually created a document so that if you would like to create a soul agreement with yourself, you can pull from loved ones who are very dialed, very in tune, mindful of their words. And they did beautiful agreements. And you'll be able to see the power of this, because we do not call them contracts. Why don't we do that?
Here's the big difference. Contracts typically do not involve consideration. They don't involve value. This is going to be a big difference between the parties trying to establish an agreement between themselves. Again, remember, fundamentally, loved ones, I mean, most of us know this by now. When you're acting in person, when you're acting in this incapacitated state, you're limited in what you can express and what you can receive. If you're limited, you're at half a cup, or maybe even worse, maybe you're only at 1/8 of a cup, capable of conveying or establishing certain interests. If you're incapacitated, that literally means your head's been removed. The head has been removed from the body. You're literally not capable of thinking for yourself. The state will do it for you. How are you going to create a trust and equity with yourself, your little you, your neighbor, your spouse, your children, if you're walking around incapacitated? You're literally a zombie trying to do, enforce, and create certain substantial things that have no place in zombie world. So we got to get out of zombie land first and foremost.
So I used to call it a soul contract. That was my language before loved ones. Think about that. Soul conning through a contract. Do you feel that? We don't use contract here no more. We use agreement. This is every word actually that starts with con, as far as I'm concerned, can just fuck right off. I actually believe that the dark ones, they created the whole con language to be able to inject it so that we keep by default just spewing their spells.
And it's interesting though, loved ones. I mean, even in the equity world, the con words are still relatively prevalent. I think, Kim, you suggested the other day, there's 600 plus words in our glossary that start with con. That's ridiculous. But again, consideration, conveyance, consciousness. These are some heavy hitter words that we were led to believe mean certain things. So again, it's interesting here now that we're looking for substitute words, substitute phrases that still get the job done. But again, we're literally purifying. We're literally removing impurities from our thought process.
But we don't practice conning souls here. So that's why you're going to notice there's no contract that will be shown. They're all agreements and trusts moving forward. And so, loved ones, you have to have trust to love. You have to have trust to have peace. So we're going to jump into a huge message that came through, because as we go through, and be clear, especially on the kindergarten, I'm all over that with my team. We monitor everything. Nothing gets by us. And I look for energetic disturbances.
And we have some loved ones that are fantastic at doing this.
So good. And thank you for showing up, because they're lessons. Because again, they were teachings even I taught. That's why there's no judgment here. There's no smacking. There's no disrespect. It's spirits coming and going, and they circle things for me. And this was one of the things that they circled for me, that all comes back to love. I'm like, Spirit, come on now. Why are you circling that? Of course it all goes back to love. But they kept circling it, showing that we were looking in the wrong place for love. So here's the thing, and Kim, if you can please put this up for our loved ones. Read this, loved ones. This is what's called a trust promise. it says, sorry, I have to go to a different document. 1 second here. You can't have love without trust. You can't have peace without trust. The reality is, it all comes back to trust. This is what we are all seeking. Once we trust our source, we can trust the source. Like your heart, love will trust its source and follow. Now, there are so many woven messages within this, but the biggest one is we can't get to love with love.
Blind love literally is directionless. Yeah, it has a blanket effect, but we want to be more specific. Take a floodlight and kind of turn it into a laser beam. Be more specific. Concentrate your efforts. Much better results.
And when it talks about once we trust our source, this is why we don't trust ourselves, loved ones, because we don't trust our source. We don't trust the information that we're getting and where it's coming from. But what if we knew? What if you never doubted your source? Then when you came across anyone, anything, any energy, you could tap into your source, and whatever source of energy you were up against, whatever energetic read you got from it, you trust it. Do you feel the difference of that? We're going around going, okay, you feel kind of good, but I feel a little bit of deception in you. I want to trust you, but I can't quite. Because they're like this. And if you're like this, trying to read this, guess what this gets more of? Got it? But if you are always centered, you're always grounded, you are connected, then any energy you come across, you just move within. You trust yourself. You don't doubt yourself anymore. You trust yourself. You trust your source. And then anything you come up against, you trust your read. So if everything about you trusts someone, guess what happens? Your heart goes, I love that. I love them. That's how you get back to love, is you have to trust what you love. So going back to this huge wisdom that came in, loved ones, we're looking in the wrong place again. And look how they tricked us to look that love is where we're trying to keep us completely focused on love instead of the steps to get there. And that's what's so beautiful. In everything we are learning spiritually, to get what we want, we got to go back. You want love, you got to go back to trust. You want peace, you got to go back to your little you. Interesting. So Darren, can you please talk a little bit more about why this is actually in reverse and not the way we've been seeing it?
Well, as we all know, I mean, Satan and his minions have wanted to keep, control over us, to keep us oppressed, keep us under his thumb, really. So when he put together a system that tricked us into trusting the system, trusting the men that we elect as kings is nothing but a prerequisite for your kingdom falling apart. That is completely misguided. It's misleading. It's misinformed. It's It's misapplied energy on a whole. So of course, this is going to be a perfect example or a perfect methodology to keep us in the dark, keep us confused, keep us mistrusting. If we don't know how to apply trust, how are we going to receive it? How do we know what it looks like? Keep us all in fear so that we can't trust each other. If we can't trust each other or a creator, we're doomed as a species. That's it. Now, again, you'll actually see it in the animal world. Animals literally trust each other. If you look carefully enough, you'll see it. And then you'll see what happens when, you know, the what is it? The alligator that's going across the river with the duck on its back, and they made a little agreement. Please don't eat me. I just want to get to the other side of the river. Oh yeah, okay, no problem. See, blind trust. The duck was seriously misinformed as to the intent of the alligator. By our very nature, we are very loving and very trusting individuals, people, and that's why Satan was
a dirty agreement, by the way.
This is why Satan was able to just pick us off, to throw us into that pit, because we were so trusting. And this is why it's such a grievous thing. This is why we're so quickly forgiven once we start applying our trust in the right place. And again, this is just a recalibration, learning how spiritually breaking ourselves down and rebuilding ourselves with the help of other loved ones so that we can learn how to trust again. Without this, again, we are all screwed.
So there's multiple trusts that need to be learned today. And we're going to do our best to teach all of them to you.
But keep in mind, the examples that we're about to provide to everybody, these are not exhaustive. These are meant to be a little bit more entry level.
Crayon.
These are like kind of crayon level. Although when you see some of the examples that were coming up, you're like, well, that's not really crayon. There's a whole bunch of your crazy words in there. Yeah, I know. But that's still fundamental trust processes.
We need to seed you a little bit.
We need to get these processes flowing so that they can mature, they can develop. Because if we were to plant impure seeds, again, I'm not interested in a field of weeds. We already have that. We're interested in a field of fruit and magnificent trees and plants and vegetation that are capable of doing what they were meant to do.
Taking care of the garden.
Exactly.
All right. So our intentions with this course, so we can be clear, is we're going to teach you how to make your own trusts, loved ones. Trusts that include trust with yourself, your family, loved ones, and for court. Also known as deed of trust. So that's going to be coming down the pipeline. And oh my goodness, did I learn it? A whack load doing this. What needs to be included in a trust?
The elements.
So much coming. So this is a thing about a trust, though, loved ones. A trust is a promise. Why are we teaching you this? Because this is for real ones, the living. Contracts are for dead people. Trusts are for the living.
And here's a perfect segue to that. An inter vivos trust is a trust for the living. Do you ever see, you'll never find a trust for the dead or a trust for fictions. No, trust me, I've looked at Pomeroy's, I've looked at Gibson's, I've looked at Gilbert's, I've looked at a dozen equity masters, prolific array of writings and teachings, and not once in there do trusts really, create a space for fictions. But here's the neat thing. We create the trust to deal with the fictions, but they're not specifically for the unliving. No, again, that's what the contracts are for.
Contracts are for monsters, the untrustables, the untrustworthy. Ouch. I know. That's why we're teaching you about trusts.
And
Let's get out of that.
I just want to throw in here real quick. Scripture, for all of you that have put your nose into that particular book, that is nothing but one big giant trust expression if you know how to read it properly. It's a whole bunch of, these are the elements you need to maintain to achieve, let's just call it greatness. And here are the penalties if you breach that trust. Creator trusted us with certain things, and Satan gets in the middle there and mucks it all up for everybody, breaking the trust. Once we're untrustworthy, we are literally cut off.
No more kingdom.
No more kingdom.
And so for an agreement to work and be successful, trust must be established and a trust must be in place. So, Darren, please talk a little bit about the constructs of the mind first.
Okay, well, as we know, government is Latin for controlling our mind. When you are an agent of the government, you are acting in a character that is incapacitated. Why is it incapacitated? That literally means that you do not have the capacity to A, manage your affairs, B, create trusts, C, enjoy the benefits of what you just created. Public citizens are actually out of that jurisdiction. They don't have the ability to create trusts. As a matter of fact, Dean and I have a very good friend a number of years ago who actually hired a lawyer to create a trust for him. And he spent a small fortune on this, like, I don't know, $5,000 or something like this. Long and story short is he took this trust expression, created and drafted by a learned lawyer, and then Buddy goes and starts going after the attorney general and starts going after the state and trying to regain his freedoms. He literally gets a letter back from the attorney general that says, your expression does not constitute the merits of a bona fide trust. And Buddy's like, Darren, how can that be? So I start looking at this document, and right about in the middle of this 12-pager, it says right here that the applicant or the man trying to create this trust is coming forward as the trustee, the beneficiary, and the settlor. As soon as I saw that, boom, fatal on its face. You can't be all three of these positions at once. And yet this is exactly how the lawyer drafted it. So this is why, again, I have reservations when it comes to trusting lawyers. I really do, because A, they're misguided. They're only trained in half of the apparatus needed to get us where we need to go. So they're going to be, they might come into play or into character, or they might become of a beneficial use when we structure our own trusts properly. This is here's the nuts and bolts of what I'm saying. We do not go to a lawyer to create the trust for us, because he's going to misguide us and screw us over. Controlling our mind, the constructs of our mind. There's a whole, but all that dirty stuff. We're not able to create these trusts because we're playing games. And while you're playing games, you're acting, which is a construct for your mind. Again, conning a structure in your own mind and in your heart, your overall state of being.
Like a matrix?
Exactly like the matrix. So again, the matrix is designed by an architect. Our whole system, or I don't even want to use the word society. Our whole society as a whole has been greatly misinformed and misled for a pure purpose, though. Again, I see this whole charade now as being nothing more than a filter for your mind and your heart to prove that you're trustworthy. If no man or woman wants to go forward and do the work, how are you going to prove yourself trustworthy to Creator when you slapped Creator in the face by volunteering to act in person for the rest of your life? Again, this is why Scripture says we do not respect persons at all, as in zero. And then I get that, well, yeah, but what about natural persons? Wrong. You can't take natural and persons and put them together. That's a conflict of interest. So although Black's Law Dictionary and legislation and talk about natural person, that's only because they can only deal with persons. As a matter of fact, and I know many of you are learned when it comes to diving into legislation and doing research. How often do you see the term a man or a woman in legislation? You want to know how often? Next to none. Why is that? Because we've all converted our man and womanness into something else. And it's that something else is what they concentrate on. So we got to clean up our mind, clean up our state of being. We got to divest our whole self from what we were taught and how we were trained to execute those teachings.
So you're going to notice there's going to be a beautiful blend of trust and trusts within this course. And that's the whole point of this, is there's multiple layerings and teachings going on here. And when we talk about trust, when we think about that word, when we feel that word, many of us have been betrayed, abused, hurt by others. So this is uncharted territory.
Perfect for Satan, though.
Absolutely.
See, like it.
And so we are thankful that we have spirit, that we are at a level where we can connect and they can bring in channelings and meditations that we need on this topic, new wisdoms. And now we're starting to see the importance of why this is coming in. Because here's the thing, loved ones. This is part of what they never wanted you to know. How to build trust with yourself. Also known as how to build and create peace within yourself.
I mean, that sounds fundamentally simple. How can you trust others if you can't trust yourself? And again, that goes hand in hand. That makes complete sense. If you're incapable of trusting yourself, how far are you going to go? Not very. So we need to establish this one first. We need to get our heads wrapped around this first. We need to understand and comprehend, why do I feel a certain way, and yet I've been trained to react differently? That creates confusion, conflict. That creates the war dynamic within yourself. And if you're at odds with yourself spiritually, you're at least double-minded, if not triple or quadruplicate. You're so spun sideways, you're not capable of effectually saving yourself. Again, there's been a lot of, in the last millennia, Christ is going to return to save us. How about this? Christ has already saved us if you listened, or if you listen, if you comprehend what he was laying down at the time. The saving is already there, saved by grace. Interestingly enough, the whole jurisdiction of equity is fundamentally created upon grace and mercy. Does that sound like pretty cohesive to Christ's teachings? Absolutely it does. But we don't get to mercy and grace when you're acting in person. All you get is further punishment, taxation, death, sickness, and others.
And furthermore, if you get to trust, you find love.
Absolutely.
Deadly combo for the Matrix.
Neo had to come in peace, and you're only coming in peace when you're like, I surrender in a place of love, and because I'm surrendering, you spiritually can no longer attack me. If you do, it's lightning bolts for you.
And a large part of establishing trust and learning trust and building trust is with these little U meditations that have been coming in. It hasn't stopped since the spring, loved ones. We haven't released this course for a reason. There's a few other foundations that have to come in first. But when you see the layered teachings he or she is about to teach you, this is where you got to go. So if you think you can avoid this to get into the garden, like we said, he or she's going to be your voice to the guardians of the garden. This is why my mommy and daddy is allowed in. This is all the work that they did as he or she holds your hand. So if you can't even envision your little yous, if you can't even go to a place where you're at peace and hold his or her hand, Spirit circling that. You need to make some new agreements. And this is the teachings that came in for our Queen schools, explaining what the new terms and obligations were going to be, how you have dishonored and left him or her and abandoned and mistrusted and misguided over and over. And these are the new trusts. This is the new way of being, not conditions. We're not going to con our little you. And through building these new soul agreements and these new little you agreements, there are trust basics, loved ones, that we have to come up with. And to do so, this is where Darren was such an amazing aid and broke down all of the fundamentals that an actual trust has to have, like identifying the parties, who the settlor is, stating the terms and the obligations, as well as what happens when there's a breach of trust.
And then who are the beneficiaries? Essentially, okay, so throw the value or the consideration into that mix as well. But really, those are the fundamentals that we need to be looking at in order to create these trusts properly. If we're missing one element, that's going to cause our trust to be a little ambiguous. And yeah, you can go to a judge and say, Your Honor, please fill in the blanks. But you know what? With a little bit of research and a little bit of due diligence, we can actually present our package in a pretty tight format so that the judge doesn't have to fill in the blanks. They would be much more impressed upon with our knowledge and wisdom if we actually can come with a pretty bona fide or with a pretty complete expression. And again, these 4 or 5 elements, I mean, once you get your head wrapped around it, they're not that difficult. Now, it actually gets to be so simple that you can express this stuff verbally on the fly. Identifying the parties is easy. Establishing the intent is easy. What's the purpose of the trust? What's the value being brought in? And then what are, the relative duties and obligations? This is a little bit easier than we think.
So we have that all broken up, coming down the pipeline here. But what we want to do is we want to cover a little bit more of the trusts of the 70%. Because again, we feel a lot of our loved ones all about the trusts of them to protect what you have in the Monopoly game. And when you're trying to bring in and protect things that are dirty and bring it into the garden, not understanding when you're in the garden, all is provided. So it's more about the 70% is what we're trying to steer towards.
And here's a quick example of that. Okay, Darren, how do I make sure my social security check every month still shows up in the mail? Here, that's the easiest way to describe it.
Sorry, my face is expressive.
Here, okay, your social security check is going to be of no.
Stop it.
It's going to be of no relevance moving forward.
Holy shit.
It's going to be of no relevance moving forward. Again, what you're about to tap into
missed it
is enough to provide social security for everybody within your respective country. So your particular little chunk of that pie, you know what? Don't even worry about it. Just let that slide.
Stop protecting dirty things.
Here's another one. How do I bring my car into my protective trust? Well, you know what?
Your Honda Civic. Okay.
Unless your Honda Civic is of special intrinsic value to you because you and your dad rebuilt the thing, repainted the thing, and now you have a very sentimental connection to this particular car. Okay, great.
Different.
Okay, in that regard, sure, fine. But you know what? When we get to use trust property, you literally have the ability to roll into any car dealership on the planet and say, that one. And so it is. 5 minutes later, you're driving the thing away. And in 1 week, you can take that particular car back to the dealership and say, okay, I'm done with that one. Now I want that one. And move forward. Again, we don't have to attach to any particular physical.
Stop attaching to the 3D and bringing it to the 5D. Come on.
We don't need to attach to.
We know better.
We don't need to attach to any of this property. The Crown, literally, let them own it all.
You will be provided for.
To a degree that it's going to blow your socks off. Again, I don't want to get into the numbers. I keep saying this, but
don't get into the numbers.
Okay, so I'm not going to get into the numbers, but there's enough wealth. There's enough private wealth for each and every one of us hiding back there to go start your own country and have your own entire monetary system to back your country. And here we are worried about a particular house, car, or boat. No, we just need to really switch gears and look at the larger picture. Now, again, sentimental value aside, of course, because there is a
sentimental is different.
There is a
attaching is what we're talking about, loved ones.
Yeah, there's going to be provisions for us made that you, by the stroke of a pen or by the words coming out of your mouth, you can instruct the trustees to provide for all of your social, economic, educational well-being. And I mean everything. It's all going to be looked after.
So stop.
Don't
Bring
worry.
in dirty 3D. Oh, loot. It's your fucking loot.
Yeah, we can literally
quit being a Scrooge of 3D.
We can
leave it.
We can literally
all of it.
We can literally relax that consciousness. We can literally say, yeah, wait a minute.
I get fired up.
The milk and honey is not reserved to just one particular piece of property. No, we literally get when we have our dominion back, loved ones, you literally have control of the friggin' planet. All of it. As long as your control doesn't interfere with mine, it's good to go.
So getting back to the other 70%, if you want to be able to have that ability to do that, there's certain things and skills you need to acquire. One being learning how to build trust with your little you. We know there are so many loved ones avoiding this part, keeping distracted with the paperwork. May we highly encourage you to go like this and to really hear what we are encouraging, because these little versions of you need your trust before you can go and build one. It can happen no other way. You do not put the cart before the horse. And when building a trust, him or her, they are very involved in this. And so, Kim, we've built something called a mommy trust and a daddy trust. You can print this off. You can make this into your own words, but you're going to start seeing how we built this and the structure of it.
And again, keep in mind, loved ones, not exhaustive in any regard. This is just a quick 1, 2, 3
Verbal.
ABC, just to get your mind seeing, okay, so just to show you the structure, just to show you that how this thing lays out.
And again, this is a verbal trust. There's verbal and there's written trust. So this would be one that you did verbally by getting into a meditative state, bringing in your little you, whatever age him or her presents themselves, knowing and setting the intentions that you're coming in to give this trust so that the appropriate little you shows up. And when they do, to say the following. Here's what it would sound like for a trust with your little you. Starting today at 12 p.m. and until further notice, Mommy is making a very special promise with you, little one. And it's called a mommy trust. And it's just for you and me. And every Friday at 7 p.m., Mommy is going to come to you in a meditation. And you can come as any age you want and tell Mommy something that you would like to do for fun. Mommy then gives you a very special promise or trust that if I can't do it right away, that I'll do it within 72 hours or 3 days. And Mommy's allowed this extra time, so she wants to arrange some additional presents or surprises for you, then she can. And if Mommy does this for you, it's so you always know how special, important, and loved you are. And so you remember what that feels like, and you can start learning how to trust Mommy again. And that's why if Mommy does not do this fun with you within 72 hours, Mommy is authorizing a lightning bolt from Creator. And then Mommy will have to make it extra fun by adding something additional to our fun date. Now, this having to happen within 12 hours of this correction. And any further breaches Mommy makes against you, little one, will be met with its equal and corresponding lightning bolts until Mommy makes up for this trespass and wrongdoing against you. And so it is. Now, as this was coming through, literally, I was channeling what I would authorize my little me to do. And guess what? I want a lightning bolt if I ever trespass against my little me. And as soon as I typed it, my little me went, I felt her. She went, oh, Mommy, you're serious. So I tapped into that energy. What do you mean, little one? Oh, the Creator's going to give you a lightning. She literally had so much respect for that. Because guess what? Pain's a really good teacher. And when you get to a state of energy, if I get a lightning bolt from my little one, I want it. And I actually know before they're going to happen where I'm like, it's very much like that Maleficent when she comes around iron, it heats up and she gets a warning first. We all get the warning. It's whether you listen to the warning or you got to get the zap. I know when I'm about to get it. Even when I speak, sometimes I'm like, okay, no, I got to align. They tell me, imagine if you align so much with Creator and your little you, where you create trust, where if I breach this with you, yes, Creator, higher self, align me and keep aligning me until I go make this right. Because if you're going to breach a trust with yourself, do you think you belong in the garden? Are you trustworthy? If you can't trust yourself, how can we trust you?
And you'll notice, loved ones, at this point, this is all about performance. This is all about you agreed to do something and you failed in your performance. Therefore, boom, whatever the consequences are. So when you're gonna pony up and when you're gonna attach your proper interest to a situation by suggesting, yeah, I do promise to perform by the terms of this agreement. Again, if you fail for whatever reason, I mean, there might be some justifiable excuse in there. Okay, fine, you can deal with that. But again, this is about encouraging better performance.
So this takes us into the second reason this course was created. In order to trust, you must trust your source.
So we need the truth to have trust. How do you have a trust without the truth? See, it doesn't work. It's impossible. You can't build a trust on deceit, which is why as a public citizen, you volunteered to practice iniquity. We literally volunteered and agreed to participate in a scheme where we all intend to deceive each other. That's why we can't, that's why we all have these blocks, these blockages, these walls. I can't trust you because there's something off. What is it? Well, again, this whole personage, this whole acting in person concept is literally, how do I trust you when you're wearing a disguise, when you're wearing a mask? I don't know who you are. I can't trust you. And it's like we can all innately sense this in each other, but we could never put our finger on it until very recently. So again, if you don't have the truth, you're not going very far in equity or trying to establish or create trusts. Truth is fundamental. Truth, the way, and the life. You put those three together, and we're talking about some serious trust expressions here. If you miss one of the three, you're misguided. If you miss two out of the three, you're severely misinformed. And if you've missed all three, go back to the beginning, start again.
So we talk about male, female energy and about getting that in balance. And the male physical energy is defined as traits of logic, reason, action, firmness, survival, loyalty, adventurousness, strength, and rationality. Female energy are traits to encompass intuition, nurturing, healing, gentleness, expression, wisdom, patient, emotions, and flexibility. But let's talk about the divine masculine and feminine. And this was some new wisdom that came down the pipeline.
Everything absent sin through wrongdoing, the sin through no truth, the sin through no wisdom, the sin through not being emotionally in control, the sin through lack of compassion and empathy is the absence of all the sins. So we can have the divinity once we're absent all those sins. If you have half of those sins, well, then consider yourself halfway to divinity. How can you be at the right-hand side of Creator and Father if you're full of sin? It doesn't quite work like that. You got to be clean. You got to get yourself emotionally prepared and stable in your ways before you're granted access or before you're allowed to re-enter the garden or the kingdom. And oddly, funnily enough, I think that's the word.
It's your word.
Funnily enough, the divine energies, it's virtually the same for a man and a woman because they're in perfect balance. Again, if we're talking about X and Y chromosomes, right, male and female, you'll notice it's not A and Z chromosomes with a whole bunch of weirdness in the middle. No, X and Y. They're right beside each other. They're very compatible. They're very close in nature and in scope. Technically, loved ones, what's the difference between a man and a woman? Well, we've got a couple of appendage differences and we've got a couple of hormonal differences. Other than that, what else is there? Not much. Your category will get very thin very quickly. So a couple of hormones and a couple of appendages, that's literally all that separates us.
But there's not a big difference. Why is it so hard to trust between all of us?
Well, again, we're because of our upbringings, because of our exposure to an environment that was there to promote confusion, it was there to instill doubt, fear, and immorality. How can we develop a relationship of trust with ourselves or a partner, family, neighbors, other loved ones, if we are all feeding from a source of iniquity? You see how it just doesn't work? It can't by its very nature. The architect put this together. And again, once we take a step back and we appreciate our positions, our situational awareness, hey, wait a minute, I'm not that different than her. I'm going to stop mentally, physically, emotionally beating her up because that's not fair. She's so very close to who I am and what I'm trying to be.
It's not about her being me.
We need to afford each other a little bit of grace, a little bit of space, so that we can develop a little further. If we're very rigid in our application of expectations, when you're full of flaws to begin with, you see how trusts just have no position here. They have no standing. They're not in the ballpark.
Our morals and values are all backwards.
Absolutely.
And that's why one of the 5 agreements is something called dirty agreements. We're going to talk about those, the agreements that you make that do not serve you.
So why is it so hard to trust? Well, again, either if we had shitty parents, shitty upbringing, shitty friends, shitty schools, shitty relationships, shitty jobs, shitty agreements, because all the morals and values are all backwards. They're all upside down. They're all inverted. How can we develop any source of reality when we're dealing with all that?
So the male and the female energy in balance within all of us needs to find a reliable source. And now we're back to that again. This is what's going to help us overcome energies we come against, pitfalls, landmines that we call, energetic landmines, where you plant them in your future. They're little bubbles that wait for you because you planted them there.
Okay, so what's a reliable source? Well, let's consider everything through Christ's teachings, and other prophetic holy teachers in the past, and scripture. That is your reliable source. Everything else is Satan's intent to deceive. Not what you learned in university, not what mom and dad taught you. None of that shit. It's only through Christ's teachings and scripture. That's it. That's your reliable source. Not the interpretation of it by some other man or woman and how that affects you. No. This is why we had to figure this all out for ourselves, and not just, en masse go to these incredible ceremonies where one particular man starts espousing his or her interpretation of the truth. Because you know what? I can guarantee it. All of them are acting in person. Every single one of them. Every single one of them are confused. Every single one of them is paying taxes. Every single one of them is misguided. Why are you going to trust the teachings of a misguided teacher? GPS will not help you here.
And so the third reason we're doing this course is our destination is trust, loved ones, not our final destination. Hear that? Our destination right now is trust. Love is a byproduct. Love is a result of trust. You can't get to love without trust. So our destination now is trust, loved ones. Focus on trust, not love. Love will come. We need to realign to a different channel. And that's what's so interesting, is to get what we want, we got to go back. And so with that, we are talking about uncharted territory that no one taught us how to do this thing called trust. And it keeps backfiring on us. Every time we're like, this person feels good, and we put trust in them, it hurts us. Why does that happen?
It's almost like we're expecting to be let down. And you will just sit back and you'll wait. Yeah, I love you, until you fuck up and you hurt me. That's how a trust is instantly dissolved. And if that trust dissolves, love is hard to be found. This is why, without being attached to the abandonment, as soon as we feel abandoned, we can't trust. That is such a prevalent thing. That is such a prevalent notion in today's society. As soon as I feel you're going to let me down, okay, so as soon as you're having that element of doubt or fear, are you fully trusting? Nope. Are you half trusting? Maybe.
Did you ever trust?
Are you fractionally trusting? How do you fractionally trust? I'm going to trust you X amount until you perform. Once you perform, then I'll trust you a little more. And once you perform a little more, then I'll trust you a little bit more now. So see how, but this thing is constantly building. And you know what? If that is how it has to be for now, so be it. I can't just instantly make every single one of you just instantly fall in trust. It doesn't work like that, because we've been brought up in an environment where the complete opposite happened to be true, which is why we're so quick to judge, which is why we're so quick to point fingers, which is so, it's so dominant in our society now. There's no trust anywhere. And you know what? To be honest with you, loved ones, nor should there be. Because when we're all running around like psychotic zombies acting in persons, it's very hard to trust that. Which is why I'm very adamant about getting our hands and our hearts, our minds spiritually cleansed, getting to a new level that we've never been to before. If we were untrustworthy here, why do you want to stay there? Doesn't make sense. We need to go up. And go ahead.
And let's talk about the money aspect of it.
What about the money aspect? Okay. Money, the financial acquisition of worth or value, trumps trust for some reason. How can I, here's a perfect example. Here, I can trust that man or woman because they're millionaires. They've made lots of money. They must be trustworthy. Really? Yeah.
Money trumps love for most people.
It does.
You see that when there's an inheritance to be had.
And the family instantly gets broken apart. They were great up until mom died. And then when it come time to splitting up the funds,
Love.
boom.
You.
So there. Did you really love? Did you really trust? No, it's all been a God. I almost said the D word. It's been a friggin'
an abomination.
It's been an illusion this whole time.
There we go.
Stop loving and trusting the illusion. All it's going to do is crash and burn your plane of existence.
So the other thing is that a lot of people that we trusted, there were not a lot of benefits and there was not a lot of consequences. So there was, I call them crumbs, breadcrumb feedings.
It's hard to build a trust when you're missing half of the elements or half of the variables.
Or each party is not getting fed properly, or it's out of balance.
So this is why what we're trying to instill upon everybody now is how to build a trust properly, how to articulate the wants, desires, needs, and anticipations, expectations properly. If I don't say, Jody, I require you to do the vacuuming today. And she's like, well, I'm not going to do the vacuuming for you until you make me a sandwich. Okay, great.
Okay.
You have an agreement. In that simple little agreement, you've actually created 3/4 of the trust elements right there.
It has to be delicious though.
Well, of course. If I show up after Jody has done the vacuuming and I give her 2 pieces of bread and say, there's your sandwich. Ooh. She's going to go,
breach of sandwich.
Breach of sandwich. Why is it a breach of sandwich? Because I did not identify in the terms of the agreement what the hell's in the sandwich. Aha, see? So technically, did I breach the trust by showing up with 2 pieces of bread? No, not really.
My bad.
Because I see, yeah, this is where the parties really need to define or articulate what it is that's going to constitute the trust. This is why um, ambiguous statements or unclarity or uncertainty or fogginess, loopholes does not get the trust built. Because if all you're trying to do now is, well, yeah, I made a trust and look, she's doing the vacuuming. Now I just got to figure out a way to, get out of making my sandwich. If that's your intent, you're not trustworthy. We should be going above and beyond. I should be coming up with a sandwich that's got 3 pieces of bread.
Yep.
We got, you got your bacon, your cheese, your egg, your lettuce, your tomato, your whatever.
I like all that.
You got a monster sandwich going here. And I don't mean a human sandwich. You've got something of incredible value
for the living
that Jody wasn't expecting. Now she's actually happy. Oh, look at that sandwich. As a matter of fact, now I'm going to go do the dusting as well because I'm so happy. See, I mean,
trust carry forward.
We need to define what it is that's in our trust and why, we're kind of wrapping this up in a little bit of silliness, but this comes into play in the future here very, very much so when we start dealing with our birth certificate issue and we start dealing with the government and we start dealing with trying to settle our affairs. If you come at them with a trust that's lacking
and loopholes and Swiss cheese.
If you present your sandwich to the Attorney General and you show up with 2 pieces of bread, he's going to say, go back to the kitchen. Simple.
So we always like to take little bladder breaks out of respect for your bladders. So we will see you in 5 minutes, loved ones. Okay, here we go. So we're going to go into the 5 agreements. And just so you know, our amazing Kim, our chancellor, is going to be putting together many of these documents that we're going to be talking about. She will be releasing them for you. So we're going to first of all talk about the definition of an agreement, not a contract. If you look up the Black's Law definition of an agreement, it means the coming together and uniting of parties to express a mutual and common special interest.
It actually said common, but we switched out common for special because we're just trying to get away from inadvertently everything common.
So the 5 agreements are, number 1, past agreements. And Kim, actually, if you can show the 5 agreements, that would be great. Here we go. So the first one being past agreements. Number 2, you make present agreements. Number 3, you make future agreements. Number 4, you make soul agreements. And number 5, you make dirty contracts. That's the time we'll use contracts. So let's get into this. Number 1, past agreements. If you look up the Oxford Dictionary version of past, it means to no longer exist. So we are talking about agreements, which means the coming together of parties to express a mutual and common or special interest that no longer exists. So these are past agreements that did exist, but no longer serve you, no longer serve the other party. And in relationships, we attract what we need to learn. And if you're bleeding, if you're broken, you attract broken or bleeding. Or a counterpart that will reflect that you are bleeding and broken. If you are insecure, if you are feeding off of someone dysfunctionally or someone is feeding dysfunctionally off of you, you will attract the appropriate actor to reflect that lesson. You need to learn some things. This soul loved you so much, it came online to show you you need to stand up for yourself, that you need to feed from positive sources, not them. So past agreements, these contracts, they expire. They have due dates. Or you can outgrow them. This is a big thing I learned on my journey. I learned it mostly in relationships, where I stayed in them a little too long. And you know, when you're in your relationship, when it's past its expiry date, when you are forcing it to work, you are unhappy all the time. You get lightning bolts all the time. There's conflict all the time, as there should be. It's expired. It's obsolete. And here's the thing, most of us know when our past agreements are overdue. So that takes us on to number 2, which is our present agreements. Present meaning existing or occurring now. So let's define a present agreement. It's the current and existing coming together of parties that express a mutual and common or special interest. Now, Darren, you brought this to the forefront as far as present agreements are the most powerful and potent loved ones of all the agreements. Why is that?
These are the agreements that are going to be subject to change on the fly. We cannot, conceivably perceive all of the elements or variables that could happen to me, you, other parties of this agreement. The present one is in a state of, it's here, but can it be added to? Can it be provided in a different manner or a different fashion? Can it grow? Can it expand? Can it encompass other energies? This is why the present one this is the evolving one. This is the one that's spinning. This is the one that has inertia behind it or momentum. And for those who are paying attention to momentum, we're always wanting to increase it. We want to feel more moving forward. Very few of us love moving backwards towards a past agreement. No. The present agreement is the one that is in this current state of being. This is the most profound one. This is the one that has the most relevance. This is the one that is grounded in the right now. Because if you're not right now, you either don't exist in the past or you don't exist in the future. Either way, you're not existing.
And present agreements have the power, loved ones, to dissolve, to deprogram, unwire past and future agreements. The past, by making a new agreement, can create new timelines. Timelines meaning a schedule for when a process or procedure will be carried out. So by having a present agreement, it negates and neutralizes many agreements around it. That's the power it has. And when you make new and present agreements, you're able to manipulate, change, and alter the way the normal scheduled process is to be carried out.
And again, a lot of this is based on what serves us or what do we serve. If your direction changes in 36 seconds, you need to be in a situation where you can amend your agreement. Well, I just got hit by a car, so therefore my agreement is subject to change, correct? Yes. So this is why we need to reserve that present right all the time to manipulate this thing on the fly.
And when you are operating outside of the normal scheduled process, this equals extraordinary. This equals superpowers. This equals new timelines, loved ones, upgrades. And that's what's beautiful about it, is these new scheduled timelines, these ascension jumps, they're based on the frequency, the vibration, the channel that you are currently tuned into, what you are currently projecting, what you are feeding on. And all of your life's current results are based on your most present, most common way of being. The way you feel or vibrate most of the time on average, this is going to give an energetic output, a signature, an imprint onto the Earth's grid, onto your aura. And it can fluctuate and change at any time, like Darren said.
Again, so we're allowing for a degree of adaptability. We can't be just rigid with the way we do things. Again, this is where a lot of religious upbringings we've experienced, they were so rigid with their principles and their doctrines that it didn't really allow for any flexibility. And if you're not flexible, what happens in a bit of a windstorm? Well, you either fall over, you know what I mean? We needed to have a little bit of process where there was a degree to accept, to question, and then to move forward. If it's so hard to move within these rigid confines, and that's what pushes a lot of people away from religion, because it's stuck in the way it promotes its own events. It's not quite as natural feeling as it claims to be. So this is what causes the confusion and the conflict.
And so again, loved ones, this is about when you are able to get present and assess where you are energetically. If you don't like your results, we need to go inward. And that's why present agreements are such presents, is you can receive gifts from them instantly. As soon as you choose, as soon as you realign, as soon as you feed from a different source, there's going to be different results. And if you don't, there's going to be lightning bolts. There's going to be more of what you're getting. There's going to be more insanity. And so that's why this is also going to include the different kinds of present trusts that you can make. So grab your pens, loved ones. When we talk trust agreements, you can make them with yourself and others. And these present agreements can be, number one, with yourself. Number two, with your past self. This is to include all variations of your little you. There's been a little confusion on, oh my God, there's more than one? Of course, there's more than one. As soon as you take a breath, that's another version of a little you. Every blink, actually, not breath, they say. Every blink is another version of your little you. So when we speak of little yous, you could have last week's version of you show up and go, hey, Mom, I don't like how you treated me. You'd be like, why is she showing up like a week ago? Because that's a version of you. It's littler because it's behind you. It could be 5, but you need to make peace and you need to make trust with all those versions of you that present themselves to you because they're presents. The third type of present trust you can make is a present self one. Basically, we got yourself, we got past self, we got present self, we got future self. Number 4, these are your future interests. And number 5, you can make present trusts with other people. Do you notice how far down the path other people were? Do you see how you were the top 4? And that takes us into number 3, future agreements. Future being defined as the time or period of time following the moment of speaking or writing. Time regarded as still to come. So future agreements now, loved ones, is the upcoming or still to come uniting of parties that will express a mutual and common or special purpose together. So talk about future agreements, please.
Okay, so future agreements, really, they are going to be an apparatus today in our mind and heart that we are trying to put into place or instill for a future event. We're trying to give regard to something that may happen in the future, and we're trying to embrace that with a certain set of terms or rules or I promise to do's. Well, these things must be open to interpretation and flexibility. Again, the whole purpose of trust construction, loved ones, is the removal of conflict and confusion. It is creating a space where there's room for space. If you try to outline yourself and put yourself in a box in the future, what if you're slightly 3 degrees to the right or 6 degrees to the left? What if you missed the mark just a little bit? If you didn't build in some type of capacity to be flexible or in a position where you can grow, you're going to have problems. And those problems are going to get compounded very quickly to the point where something's going to start to implode or explode. So we need to account for these things. So I'm going to say a future agreement, it's going to be trying to accomplish a couple of things. It's going to try to manage to the best of your abilities something that may happen. Well, that word may is very broad. And how can you possibly account for all the variables or all the things? You can't. So therefore, leave a little portion of your agreement open so that you can tweak this thing on the fly. Don't box yourself in. As a matter of fact, we're trying to remove the box, not create more layers of box.
All right, that takes us into number 4, soul agreements. And when I actually looked up what a soul means, dictionary.com, shame on you. It defines a soul as a human being, a person.
Could you be more opposite?
I'll try not to throw up on live camera right now. Horrible. I'm like, wow. So we went to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which defines soul as, it still says a person's, but you can see how they twist their twisted teachings, like we talk about. But a person's deeply felt moral and emotional nature. Now, when you look up the terminology of nature meaning a primitive state of existence, untouched and uninfluenced by civilization or social constraints. Wow. Potato. All right. So when you look at actual soul contracts, if we're going to define that, it means the coming together and uniting of parties to express a mutual and common special interest founded in one's truth and natural love state being. Now, here's the thing. We don't even know what that is, loved ones. We don't even know what it's like to be in a state of one's true and natural love state being. That's a sad thing.
And here's why. We're all disconnected from our souls because we're all running around with a costume on. And all we see in each other is the costume. We actually can't see what's inside that costume. That's the complexity of the word person. Imagine going to a Halloween masquerade party and you never leave. That's your entire freaking life. You actually don't know anybody. You're disconnected from your soul. You're soulless. And because you're soulless, you're at conflict. You're at war. You're not at peace.
That's why we get so mad at the actors and our family that are being exactly who we asked them to be because we made these agreements with them to stand and reflect what we need to see that irritates and frustrates and triggers us so much. And we blame them because we forgot. The ones hurting you the most, loved ones, right now, they love you the most. What soul made of love would ever agree to hurt you unless you had to beg them on the other side to do it so you could learn something? So if they're bugging you, you're missing it.
And again, these lessons, they're not for the weak of heart, or you might be weak for a moment, but once you jump into that fire, you're coming out the other side stronger than ever. So do not dismiss your lessons. Do not veer away from your shit pits. Do not disengage from what's meant to be. The longer you prolong these things, the inevitable will happen, and that's just more combustible than dealing with it right now.
Remember to remember.
If you're afraid of the fire now, why are you throwing gas on it by avoiding it? Throw a can of gas on it and run the other direction. Really? Yeah, I know. Eventually you're going to be surrounded in flames and you're going to have nowhere to go.
You designed it that way. If your flames are getting more intense, it's because you're not learning. You're fighting it. Stop.
Trust.
Open. Clear.
Trust the fire's there for a purpose.
And don't go in dirty. This is happening for a reason. Anything that's your biggest, and they're making me just grab at myself. Anything that's causing this, you designed, you sat with Creator and you said, okay, I got to bring in my soul family. Well, and there's soul pods, loved ones, before we come here, and you bring them in because you've worked with them before. They're familiar. You know them. That's called family. You can trust them. That's why you're trying to develop these agreements with them. And a soul trusts a soul on the other side. And you sit down, you go, hey, mom, you're going to be my mom. And I need you to be very disconnected. I need you to be abusive. I need you to not fill my cup in any shape, way, or form. And she goes, honey, why would I ever do that? Because I need to learn how not to connect to people, because I'm going to have this actor You come, I need you to be boyfriend number 3, and you're going to be husband number 1, and you're going to be husband number 2. And you all are going to reflect the same thing to me because mom, you're going to be my trigger because I need to learn how to do that. And I need these contracts and agreements to come into effect so I can learn this. And if I still don't get it, I need this actor and this actor and this actor to come online over and over until I get it. And you sit stuck in your story going, look at all the people that are like so mean to me. We designed it that way. Remember, it can happen no other way. No soul can come in your bubble. It's against your free will unless you authorized it, unless you made an agreement. This is one of the greatest teachings we can give you. It was one of my greatest ones, to be able to get to a place where the people who hurt me and abused me, I asked you to do that. That's a big one. I get it. Trust me. I had to sit and rock myself on that one many, many times, as I had to connect to that soul, because I don't have any contact with them anymore. To connect with their soul and go, oh, okay, I need to remember I asked you to do this. Why did I ask you to do this? Holy shit. You're not my source. Or I'm trying to get your approval. Your approval doesn't matter. My approval matters. I am trying to get feedings off of you. You're not my source. Source is my source.
They're called life lessons for a reason. If we are born and inherently have no requirement to learn any lessons, what's the point of life then?
That's why we made agreements before we came here. So stop pointing fingers. Oh, this person got the job. That it doesn't matter. It's about they chose that. That's their right. It's about why did we choose this as a soul pod? What am I supposed to learn? Don't worry about them. Stay in your own lane. Manage your card, or you're smashing your emotional one into yours into theirs.
Perform your duties and obligations within your own trust. Don't worry about what the trustees are doing.
And that's a big one.
The judges will deal with that for you. Who are the judges? He that executes the revenge. He that balances the equities. That's not up to us. Stay in your lane.
So let's move on to number 5, dirty agreements. Dirty being defined as not clean or pure, containing impurities, morally unclean or corrupt. So let's define dirty agreements. The coming together and uniting of parties to express a mutual and common special purpose that is unclean, impure, and corrupt in nature. Loved ones, think back to a dirty agreement you made. Something that did not serve you, where you knew entering it, red flags were all over it.
And yet, most of us still chose to experience it
and enter into it.
Why? Why do we do things knowing that they're going to explode in your face? There must be a lesson in there somewhere. You know what? If it's not for your personal growth and development, at least document it so you can show it to others. Say, hey, don't put this and this together because boom. But you know what? Watch how many of those still go and do it. We all have to experience these things for ourselves so that we can truly connect with it. I can't truly connect with things that other people are doing. I need to see it, feel it, and experience it for myself in order to believe it.
So even listening to that whole definition of a dirty agreement, it doesn't even sound good. It should be a dirty contract. Because to hear dirty agreement, the coming together and uniting of parties to express a mutual and common interest that's unclean, impure, and corrupt. There's a conflict here, loved ones. That's why we used to call them dirty contracts. It's where you know you're selling your soul. You're getting in bed with the devil. It's against your true and natural state of being. We enter into these with many of our loved ones, our family, over and over and over again. When we know better, it's just going to result in more impurities, more uncleanness. The Bible speaks of this.
And really, at the end of the day, where and why and how? I'm going to suggest a lot of this comes from our inability to deal with our own vulnerability. I can't be vulnerable with you because I don't trust you. Therefore, I'm going to create a sabotage that's going to completely screw up our agreement or our arrangement so that I don't have to actually deal with coming to terms or grips with the situation and learning to overcome a fear and learning how to trust you. We're all misguided. We're all misled. We all are feeding from the wrong source.
So cleanliness is next to godliness.
This does not mean making sure your bathroom's clean. I can literally pee all over the floor and still have clean hands spiritually. Again, cleanliness is next to godliness. They're not talking about the dirt on your kitchen floor. They're not talking about that. They're talking about the spiritual cleanliness here. They're talking about acting in person or not. That's ultimately what this comes down to.
So let's talk about the difference. If you are wondering about the difference between a present and a future trust, because they're similar, it's that the obligations and the terms of the trust may not be applicable as they are in the present. And this is what you were talking about as far as being able to amend.
Yeah, circumstances are always going to change. Life is not static. It's evolving. How? We do not have the ability to create a complete trust for the future, because we're just not in possession of all the variables. How can you make an informed decision when you've only got half of the parts and pieces? You can't. You're winging it the rest of the time. And when you wing it, you must allow for some subject to failure. There must be some kind of a ratio there where, shit, I didn't account for that. And then that happened and that happened. That led to this. Oh boy, look at the predicament I'm in now. Great, fine, don't worry about that. But again, allow yourself some flexibility.
All right, so moving forward, the 5 components of building a trust. Here we go, loved ones. Kim, if you can please put this up. Knowing that a trust is a promise and only for the living. Number 1, we need to first of all identify the parties. This is the structure of any trust. It doesn't matter if you're building it for yourself, for court. You need to first of all identify the parties. Number 2, you have to identify the settlor for the purposes of valuable consideration. We will speak of this. Number 3, what are the terms? Number 4, what are the obligations?
Now keep in mind, loved ones, 3 and 4, they can kind of go back to back here, but we just kind of split them up so that, again,
you know the difference.
So that we do, there is a distinct difference.
It's usually called terms and conditions, but we don't use conditions. We use obligations. All right, and number 5, what are the breaches and penalties of the trust? This is what buttons up loopholes. This is what creates a sound trust so you don't have a Swiss cheese one.
Do you have a sandwich or do you have 2 pieces of bread?
Big difference. So number 1, let's break this down now. And what's great is we've actually done a scenario and we have a PDF that we're going to be putting up here so you can see it. We actually have multiple PDFs that you're going to be able to print off here today. So first of all, number 1, identifying all parties and their roles. What does that mean?
Okay, so now depending on the situation or depending on the intent of the particular trust you're trying to create, the parties may be described in several different ways. So if you're trying to create an agreement or a trust expression with your children, you'll be fine getting away with identifying little Johnny and little Sarah. You don't need to identify them any further. For purposes of court and settling our affairs with our birth certificate, okay, we're going to have to be a little bit more specific for that particular trust. But for the intents and purposes of the trust you're creating, you need to be a little bit dynamic with how you identify the parties. Now, typically in a trust expression, they're going to want to see the full name. Now, normally they're going to refer to the full legal name. That's fine to get the trust started here, because maybe the result of this trust is you losing the last name, the past name. So what's the occupation? Where does this individual live? How old are they? things of this nature. Define and describe the parties as best as you can within a reasonable amount of time. Again, don't take a page to identify a party. You do it in a sentence.
Now it's up to the settlor, loved ones, to determine or appoint a trustee. This is a big one. Within a trust, a settlor is always established, and they're the ones appointing the trustee of the trust and its his or her corresponding duties. So it's the settlor that's building the trust and establishing who the parties are.
Synonymous names for settlor. We have grantor, we have trustor, we have a number of different terms that are basically going to identify the party that's creating the trust. That's the settlor, that's the grantor, that's the one that's got all the parts and pieces, that has all the intent.
So we're going to be using an example today, loved ones, so we can build on this story to kind of give you a bit of a visual. So here's an example. The settlor, mom, she's the one doing laundry. She appoints dad as trustee to manage the new terms of the laundry service. Okay, so before we go into this, loved ones, we have to talk about the basics of a trust. This was big. This is why we had to build this in, because as I was going through this, I'm like, loved ones need to get this. There are always 3 parties to every trust. Number 1, a trustee. Number 2, a beneficiary. And number 3, a settlor. Your trust must have all 3 of these in place, or it's going to be deficient. So a trustee, let's talk about that, please.
A trustee is the duly appointed individual or corporate entity or friend or loved one, it doesn't matter. They're going to be the ones accepting the primary duties or the primary performance. They're going to be the boots on the ground, the one running around doing all the work, doing all the managing, looking after all the affairs of the trust, making sure things are done on time, making sure the trust property is protected at all times. So the settlor is the only one that appoints a trustee. Now, if you don't know who a particular trustee is for a particular trust expression, this is where we go to court. Say, hey, Your Honor, I've got a trust going over here, but I don't really know who to appoint as trustees to fulfill this particular obligation. The judge is going to say, okay, Tim, let me take a look at that. Okay, you require the trust is found wanting 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, I know who to appoint as trustee for this particular circumstance, and the judge will do so. So again, we don't need to get caught up in, because here's the messages. Okay, Darren, so who do I appoint as trustee for my birth certificate trust? Well, if Darren doesn't know, Darren's going to suggest going to the judge and ask him the question.
So do we also list the director and the administrator? And can they also be the trustee?
Directors, administrators, executors, executrixes, these are all trustees. Absolutely. If you don't have the wherewithal to appoint these particular individuals within your trust, again, feel free to go ask the judge who's best suited to fulfill the role of trustee in this particular circumstance, Your Honor. But you know what? Go ahead, for shits and giggles, throw down. I duly appoint the Minister of Finance. I duly appoint the Minister of Justice. I duly appoint the Minister of Health.
Let's get back to the crayon for those of you in the group. So getting back to our laundry illustration, to illustrate trustee, mom, the settlor, appoints dad as trustee to make sure the kids, the beneficiaries, we're going to get to that in a minute, bring their dirty clothes and bedding to the laundry room every Sunday before 12 o'clock noon. Okay.
So that's that's a term. That's a specific arrangement.
Dad's been appointed trustee
to manage this.
So dad has the burden of the trust, loved ones. He has to make sure the kids bring the dirty laundry to the laundry room, or they won't get their laundry done on time for the upcoming week. Dad is appointed, he's entrusted, he's responsible as the trustee to make sure this trust is fulfilled.
So the trustee does not have the ability to change or amend or alter the trust.
This is big. Write this down, loved ones.
All the trustee can do is jump when the settlor says how high. That's it. The trustee can literally, I'll just fast forward here for a moment. Yeah, the trustee can go to court and get things done. They can get instructions, they can get directions, they can have influence through the courts only. A trustee cannot go to the trustee's best friend on Saturday's golf game and say, hey, you know what, Bob, I'm dealing with a particular private trust over here, and I'm not sure how to execute this. And Bob, in the middle of his swing, says, well, you know what, that sounds like a bunch of horseshit. I wouldn't worry about that at all. See, the advice from Bob and his friends is of no consequence. Only a judge is qualified to get involved and intervene to make sure that the trust is executed for the benefit of all those involved.
So let's go into what a beneficiary or beneficiaries are. Now, this is the party who receives a direct benefit, something of value due to a particular event, or something has happened to entitle them to receive it. Now, the big word here is direct benefit.
And here's why. Darren, do trustees derive a benefit from the trust? Well, yeah, they get paid. They're granted certain powers and provisions. They get to execute all kinds of good stuff in the background. So is that a benefit? Yes, but it's an indirect benefit. That's like it's a standard. Yeah, the trustee is going to get paid. So it's not really construed as a benefit. The trustee has to work to get that indirect payment, does he not? The trustee has to show up to work 9 to 5 every day to get the paycheck. The beneficiaries do not have to show up for work to get the paycheck.
So here's an example. Party C and D, the children, they directly benefit because when they want clean sheets or socks for the week, all they have to do to qualify is they just have to listen to dad when asked and gather their laundry before noon to meet the terms and obligations that are enclosed within the trust. Now, do beneficiaries have the ability to amend and change and alter the trust?
Not really. Yeah, beneficiary probably could bring suit to a court, bring a motion to a judge and say, look, Your Honor, this trust no longer serves the beneficiary because. Okay, well, in that circumstance, yes. But that's not the beneficiary amending it. That's the judge amending it. So no, technically, the beneficiaries, they're locked into their position. They can't wiggle. They can't do much except enjoy the benefit of the property. The settlor is the only one that can alter, amend, change the agreement.
Number 3, people. Number 3.
And whether it's in writing or by voice or by, instruction to another party, point is that only the settlor can change this thing.
And the settlor is a party that transfers interest or something of value or securities, in this case, the clean laundry.
So the settlor has the ability to amend and change with or without notice. Again, that part at the end, the with or without notice, is important. How can you change or amend something if you don't provide the notice or you don't tell the trustees you just changed it? You can't say, oh, I'm just going to change the trust altogether and not tell anybody. So now when the trustee doesn't perform as you desired, now you can't scream breach. No, it doesn't work. This all must be done in complete good faith. If you have any ill intent or any misguided applications of your expression, it's not a trust. So coming with clean hands and in complete good faith are part of the requisites of creating a trust in the first place. This is why public citizens can't create them, because they've signed up, they volunteered, they're practicing iniquity. They intend to deceive. How can someone who intends to deceive create a trust? Wrong. Doesn't work.
So the settlor holds all the power over the trust. So let's get back to the example. Party A, mom, is the settlor. And because she's tired of doing all of the work for laundry services and to give her enough time to do the chore, she appoints dad to help her get the children to help her. To everyone's benefit.
Indirectly.
Primarily the children, the beneficiaries. or mom will stop doing the laundry altogether, or be unable to guarantee it gets done on time. This is how we're forming the trust.
So this is very similar. This is literally the same thing as being trustees in possession of the birth certificate. We are holding this thing as trustee, which means we are responsible. If we don't do, or if we don't act to the best interests of that implied trust, we get penalized because we're the trustee. When we breach the trust, well, here's an example. When I applied for my driver's license as a trustee, I agreed to stop at all stop signs. If I get caught not stopping at a stop sign, what happens? Can I complain to the officer? No. You previously agreed, you volunteered. He's got you. You can't do a yeah, but. There's no what ifs. There's no, well, I didn't see it. Well, if you didn't see the stop sign, you shouldn't be driving because it's right there. Point being, you can't wiggle out when you're a trustee. You're locked down to whatever it is you promised to do. If you promise to do a whole bunch of shady, shitty things, be ready for the lightning bolts.
So getting back to number one, which is identify all parties and their roles. This would be all the parties that are involved, and the settlor lists all of the family members who would be engaging in the event and their relation.
Just let me interrupt for a second. Trust expressions are all about relationships. It's the relation between the parties. Here's one. The relationship between a guardian and a ward. There. That's a primary example why equity will come in and help to dissolve that arrangement. When the ward is now able to manage his or her own affairs, they no longer need the guardian. This is what the trust expressions are for.
And this is why it's important to put your relation to these parties if you are the settlor. So we have an illustration coming up, but for instance, we would put the parties to the manifested trust herein are described as party A, Eve, mom. You would enter your names and titles, but loved ones, no surnames. Don't you be putting that dirty name on any agreement moving forward as a living thing.
When it comes to doing laundry.
Yes.
We don't need to bring that fiction into doing laundry. Nobody is acting as a fiction when we're dealing with laundry. This is all real. There's no commercial involvement here. So when it comes time to express our trust, when it comes down to our birth certificates, there's an application where we need to be talking about surnames because we're literally putting that surname in the trust. How do you put the surname in the trust if you don't identify the surname? See?
So when we talk about parties and identifying them, when we're doing that, how would our loved ones?
So for a family unit, let's just deal with the first names only. If you're dealing with a bank and you're trying to express a trust involving commercial activity, that's when you're going to want to use surnames. But here's the kicker. When we create our primary trust expression to deal with our surname, once you do that, now you no longer have to use your surname. That surname belongs to the trust. Only the trustee is allowed to use their surname. It's not yours. It didn't come with you at birth. It was attached later, as we've talked about in previous episodes.
Okay, so we're going to list all the parties. You're going to be able to see what that looks like because, again, the PDF that we're going to be attaching, you can print it off and you're going to be able to see exactly where you put your information. Number two, identify the settlor for the purposes of valuable consideration.
To support the agreement, there must be value. If there's no value brought to the agreement, what's the point? The value is going to change hands. The value is going to be attached to property. Property, whether it's real or personal, again, real estate, real property, or personal property. These are two variations of the word property. They're not one and the same. They're slightly similar, but they're not. They're different. So the consideration or the value gets attached. Okay, so Darren, what would the value be when mom is trying to show up as the settlor to express this trust? Well, the value is, do you want to wear dirty clothes for the rest of your life?
So here's an example. For mom to provide ongoing laundry services, the new trustee, dad, must make sure it's gathered and provided on time. for the specified parties within the trust in order for the benefit to happen. In order for the family to have clean sheets and socks done on time, party B is paying for it by managing it in order to have this service continue. Here's another example. Party A, the settlor, establishes with trust in consideration, which the value, so consider this value is basically what that means. The value being having the laundry done for the family on time.
That's value.
That's what's on the table right now. Mom's saying, if you want this in exchange for this, in exchange by transferring duties, obligations to party B. So, hey, Dad, you want this? You're now responsible. So if you want the children, the benefits of them having clean laundry and socks, make sure that it's here and it meets the new terms and requirements. Okay, so let's go into terms now. What are the terms? Terms are, how long is this in effect?
It's a period of time. Every trust or every agreement must have a date of entry and a date of exit. The day it starts and the day it terminates.
Hours, months, days, years. It's to include when you're entering into the trust and its stop point. How long the duration is in effect for. You're going to see this in the wording in the illustration that we're going to be using.
So here's an example, just quickly again. You can create a trust for a number of years, or you can create one to infinity.
And beyond. Sorry, can't help it.
So again, these are terms that we need to identify. We actually need to include. These must be in the presentation here. Otherwise, it's, well, how long do I do this for? 1 weekend? Well, no. See, again, so our trust will not be effective if we don't have a time frame attached to it.
And the terms are also to include the stipulations, loved ones. It's the whole what ifs. So here's an example. What if, sadly, one of the parties dies within the trust? What if a new one's born? What happens when the child turns of age when they can do it themselves? These are all terms.
These are all contingencies. And for anyone that's looked into trust stuff, is going to see things called contingent remainders and contingent interests. These are the types of terms that we're talking about. They're events that may or may not happen. And if they do, this will happen.
So speaking of these terms of when the agreement changes, let's talk about amending the terms.
Okay, so again, technically there are two types of trust, and then it branches out from there. You got irrevocable, and then you got revocable. Irrevocable means, again, vocable means you can't change it. Irrevocable cannot be changed, even by the settlor. The settlor agrees to an irrevocable trust by not wanting to change it, ever. What's a revocable trust? A revocable trust is one that you can amend. You can change it umpteen times to suit your particular needs at a moment's notice. So if you need a trust that's going to be adaptable, if you need a trust that's going to be flexible, you may or may not want to deem it to be an irrevocable trust.
Did you hear that, loved ones?
Because once you lock yourself down into a irrevocable trust, you don't have the power to change it later. So unless you are just incredibly gifted at creating these trust expressions, I'm going to suggest for now,
them.
Yeah, I mean, and again, for you to have the ability to ascertain all of the possible contingent interests or future events, which is literally impossible, loved ones, be very selective when you create an irrevocable trust.
Can a trustee change a revocable trust?
No. Here's one time that I can think of when I'm going to create an irrevocable trust. When I take an undivided, whole, 100% security interest in this birth certificate, and I'm going to transfer it to new trustees. There is no, after I do that once, that's irrevocable. I do not want the ability to ever change it. Why, in my right mind, would I ever want to change that later once I transfer it away? The only way to change it would be to accept it back. That's one of the few times you're ever going to want to create an irrevocable trust, because now it's locked in stone. The trustees can't wiggle up from underneath it. It's done. And you never want to change that once you do it.
That's huge, loved ones, that the trustee and the beneficiaries cannot change anything of the trust, only the settlor.
Okay, so then Darren, how do we as a beneficiary change the trust when we're trying to create the trust for our benefit? Well, you take the beneficiary hat off.
Become the settlor.
I'm now coming quickly as the settlor to amend and alter the trust on such and such a date for such and such intent and purpose. And as soon as that's executed, boom, you go right back to putting the beneficiary hat on. You can only be one of these parties at the same time. Again, this is where Dean and I failed a little bit, where in the past 20 years, we got pretty excited about endorsing all of our paperwork as grantor beneficiary. Grantor beneficiary, grantor beneficiary. I can see the failing in that now. The judge, if I was a judge, I was looking at that, I would say, okay, well, then which one are you? See, you literally just commingled. You just literally confused your paperwork by specially endorsing it as both capacities at the same time. Wrong. Don't do it. Do one or the other. And then create a whole other piece of paperwork that has the other title attached to it. So I'm going to create paperwork A as settlor. That one's done. Put it in an envelope. Now I'm going to create paperwork B as the beneficiary.
So you don't want to come as both?
No.
Ever.
Settlor,
trustee, settlor.
Coming as both parties at the same time. Again, this is why Buddy, who hired a lawyer and paid thousands of dollars to have a legal trust created, failed on its face, because I saw it with these eyes. The lawyer had right in there, this individual party, he's the trustee, the settlor, and the beneficiary. There's no valid trust at all when you're all three of those. The whole purpose of a trust is giving something to another party. And that other party is not you. Well, at the moment, anyway. There needs to be a distinction between these two capacities or three capacities. You can't show up as all three at the same time. Impossible.
So do you want to come as a beneficiary? Do you want to come as a settlor? Do you want to come as a trustee?
Well, depending on what you're trying to do. Okay, so here you go, for example. I have a birth certificate. I've elected and volunteered to be the trustee of this thing. Okay, now what do I do? How do I get to the settlor position? Well, by being the trustee, by being the surety of this particular certificate, I have the ability to perfect an interest in it. And once it's perfected, it can't be unperfected. Okay, so as trustee, I perfect it, I make it whole. Now that it's whole, it is capable of being transferred. You can't transfer half of your title.